Hello, welcome back to my channel, or if you have not been here for the first time, welcome. My name is Bryn. I am transgender and non-binary, and I make videos about those topics. Before I get started with this video, I keep on forgetting to put this in my videos. If you watch any other non-binary people on YouTube, let me know and I'll link them down below. I have a few different people that I've linked down below. Specifically, if you watch anyone who is a person of color who is non-binary, that would be awesome. I know, I talk about how it's frustrating that there's not much representation for people who were assigned male at birth and non-binary, and I also know that people of color struggle with lack of representation as well. I do have one or two people of color in my description box down below. I also have I have like Ash Hardell, and I think I have a total of 4 people they're in every single description box of every video that I've done, or at least the trans videos that I've done. But if you have anyone that you really like to watch or whatever, let me know down below so I can link them in the description box. That way other people can see and have, obviously different people that they can watch and relate to. Today I wanted to talk about something. I actually filmed this video last week, but then I didn't like the way that I looked and blah, 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 blah. But I wanted to talk about passing today because I feel like there's so many different angles to kind of discuss it from. And I also feel like there's a lot of layers to it. I kind of want to talk about the benefits and the opposite of benefits. I don't know. But the pros and cons of the idea of passing and passing in general, and just kind of go into detail with that because especially I know most of my audience are other non-binary people, but in case there's any cisgender folks that watch this, this could be a little bit more on the educational side rather than just me sharing my experience. Although of course I will sprinkle my experience in here because I always do. But I don't know, I feel like it's an important thing to talk about, so here I am talking about it. Let's start off. What is passing? Most of you, if you are trans and or non-binary, you probably know what passing is, but essentially it's being perceived as the gender that you identify with or would like to be perceived as a trans person, or even as a gender non-conforming person if you don't identify as trans. So an example of that would be a transgender woman who I guess isn't detectable as trans, or people assume that she's a cisgender woman when they look at her, speak to her, interact with her. So the first thing that I want to clear up with passing, specifically for cisgender people who don't know a whole lot about trans things, there's this misconception that all trans people want to pass. So this typically refers to trans binary people, so for example a trans woman or a trans man, but even people who are non-binary are sometimes expected to want to pass, as typically people assume as the opposite gender that they were assigned at birth. So the reason this is problematic is it's just like not true. There are a lot of trans people who want to pass. There are a lot of trans people who want to be perceived as cisgender and don't feel comfortable sharing the fact that they're trans with everyone they interact with, or maybe not even anyone that they interact with. It's like obviously a whole spectrum. Everybody's preferences and whatever are all different, just like for literally anything at all. And I think that can confuse cisgender people, like, well, why wouldn't you want to pass? So from a non-binary perspective, passing as either male or female, for a lot of non-binary people can feel not good, because it feels invalidating, because it's still kind of pushing non-binary people into a box that they may not identify with or feel comfortable in. So for trans people who are not non-binary, so a trans man or a trans woman may not enjoy passing or not want to pass because they feel like their trans experience is something that they would like to be expressed through their visual appearance. So obviously it's different for everyone, but I know a lot of trans people who don't want to be assumed as non-trans, and that is perfectly valid, and it doesn't make you less trans to not want to be cis, basically. There's also a lot of pressure because of the assumption that trans people want to pass. There's pressure to pass. So for example, I've seen this in the trans community, and I'm actually going to use an example. I'm not going to use names, but there's an LGBT center somewhat near me, and there's a woman who's like older, like, I don't know, old enough to have gray hair. I don't know what her age is, but she had said to this one woman, and this trans woman, and the trans woman's wife was telling me this, that she told this woman with absolutely no one asked her opinion, nobody cared what she had to say. Sorry. She was like, oh, you passed really well except for your voice. You should work on that. Okay, so there's an example, even in the trans community, where this trans woman was told that her voice doesn't pass, which can automatically be dysphoric for some people, and it's also telling her that in order to be valid as a trans person, you need to work on your voice. You need to sound more feminine. You need to do this to be valid. And that's not okay, and that's not true. There is no, like, right way to transition. The right way to transition is to do it the way that you fucking want to. That is it. That is the right way. And it can be confusing when you're getting told in every direction that you're not doing it right and that you don't count because your experience or your desires are different than what they think your desires and experience should be. And so that can obviously be very problematic, and it can cause a lot of, like, I don't know how to explain it, but cause a lot of issues, basically. So that is why the assumption that trans people want to pass is problematic, and it also feeds into that pressure to feel the need to pass, even if it's something that you don't want to do. And if you don't want to pass, that's okay. There's also the fact that some people can't pass. Some people, you know, I'm trying to keep this as sensitive as possible because I don't want to, like, induce dysphoria on people, you know, if I'm, like, saying certain things. Like, there's some people that in order to pass, maybe they would need surgery, or maybe they would need hormones, and maybe they don't have the insurance or the money or whatever to do that, or maybe they're just not ready to do that, or maybe they don't want to do that, but their gender is still valid regardless of whether or not they pass. And that's something that I see a lot, even in the trans community. Like, to me, it's really fucked up that trans people are over here basically making other trans people feel invalid. Like, what the heck? Like, we're all a part of the same community. Let's just, like, not be dicks. Like, I don't know what else to say about that. But I've seen people who are, whether they're trans or they're cisgender people who are supportive of trans people, they will support the trans people who pass and then degrade the ones who don't. They will call people who pass by their pronouns and deliberately not call people who don't pass by their pronouns. And the fact that the level of respect that you have for somebody is based on their physical appearance and how well you understand that to align with their gender, like, it's problematic. Like, it's not okay, and it's hurtful. It's really hurtful because there are people who, you know, identify as a certain gender and are comfortable not passing, but then they have to deal with all the bullshit from the people walking around being like, nope, you don't count because you're not on testosterone, or you didn't get this surgery, or your hair isn't long enough for me to think that you're actually a woman, or like whatever. Like it's it's a really frustrating thing, and this is something that I specifically hear from non-binary people as well. It's really frustrating to have to choose between your authenticity and your mental health, I guess, might be a way to summarize it. Like, basically, you're choosing, do I feel at home in my body but get misgendered every day and told that I'm not valid and made to feel this big every day? Or do I transition in the way that other people want so that I don't have to deal with that outside expectation and pressure, but then I don't feel comfortable with myself? It's like a very, like, I can't think of the word, but it's a lose-lose situation. That is what it is. And so as a society, especially if there are any cisgender people watching this, I would really, 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 really push you to accept all trans people instead of just the ones that make sense to you. Another thing that, this isn't like passing in itself is problematic, but I will say it can have its downfalls, even if like you're a trans person who wants to pass 100% of the time, doesn't want people to know that you're trans or like whatever. It can make things more difficult. So I'm going to use myself as an example because I love talking about myself. So when I first started transitioning, especially before I started hormones, most people that would read me would either just think I was a guy, or they would read me as a trans woman. And with that came the assumption that I had genitals of someone who was assigned male at birth. And so in any sort of romantic or, you know, intimate kind of dynamic, you know, even if I just started talking to somebody, they knew what my body was like, and so I didn't have to worry about them rejecting me later on for it, because I would know that they know, basically, I guess. Like, I didn't have to communicate that. And so that made that kind of stuff a little bit easier, because anyone who was expressing attraction or interest in me, I knew that they knew what I had and that they were okay with that. Whereas as I've raised my hormone dosage and I've gained weight because I was very sick back then and whatever, most people read me as female, or like someone assigned female at birth who's non-binary. That's basically the two the two genders that I get called most of the time. And for me, passing is something that helps alleviate like mental distress. I'll get into the pros of passing after this, but now, like, if I were to go on Tinder or something and start talking with somebody, you know, unless I had it in my caption that I'm trans or whatever, or even if I'm just like walking along the street and someone comes up to me and blah, 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 whatever, you know, I at some point probably will have to fill them in because they're not making that assumption anymore. And that can be, you know, that kind of feels like a sticky situation. It's like, well, when do I tell them? Do I tell them 2 seconds after they say hey? Or do I wait till our first date? Or do I, you know, whatever. And I'm not dating anybody. I'm not going on dates. But I'm just saying, you know, it makes it a little bit more complicated because people are not making the assumption that I'm trans. And so they're probably making the assumption that I have stuff that correlates with someone who was assigned female at birth, and so I have to correct them, basically. It can be just uncomfortable, it can even be unsafe, it can be a lot of things. So that's something that's kind of like a con of passing in and of itself, or can be anyways, is that, you know, you have to have those conversations. I mean, you don't have to, like, you know, like, it's not like your job to tell everyone in the world that you're trans, but, you know, if it's relevant and you feel like you should, then, like, you have to have that conversation because people aren't assuming it about you already, which can be a lot of bleh. Another problematic thing is this idea that in order to be attractive as a trans person or non-binary person or whatever, you have to pass. And that's very problematic because, and it makes sense in the sense that, like, you don't really see trans people plastered all over TV in every magazine ever, and the ones that you do see are the ones who are able to pass. And so that is where this idea comes from, obviously, the same way that people who are plus size or people, you know, who, like, literally, who are disabled or literally, like, anything, you know, there's only this like small portion of bodies that we see in the media, and it's like problematic, and everyone knows that. But what I'm trying to say is, you don't have to pass to be beautiful. You don't have to pass to be attractive. You know, you are attractive in and of yourself because of who you are, and your body is a reflection of that. And so whatever it looks like is beautiful. And the people who don't see that are the people that are just wrong. Like, I don't know how else to say it, you know. Yeah, that's like a big problem, and that's a part of the reason why trans people sometimes want to pass, is based on attractiveness. Like, you know, I had a friend who struggled with her identity. I don't think she is trans, but she is on the masculine side, and she really struggled for a long time because she felt like when she would be masculine that she wasn't attractive. And but so she was kind of choosing between, like, her identity and her her personal desire, or the way that people desire her. And, you know, it's sad. That shouldn't have to happen, but that's where a lot of trans people are at. And so, you know, it's really frustrating that trans people are seen as unattractive until they can perform cisgender beauty standards. It's like, what the fuck? Now I'm going to talk about the pros of passing. So the principle of passing and the assumption that people want to pass and the pressure to pass is all messed up. Passing in itself can be good or it can be bad. But some of the good things about passing is you may be safe, or safer. So I know I just gave an example of how passing can make you unsafe because you have to tell people these things. But at the same time, if you are not being detected, I don't know what word to use, but detected as trans, you are less likely to get attacked for being trans, or, you know, be called slurs or whatever. Like, you kind of blend in with society to the point where you don't have to worry about feeling isolated and rejected and all that kind of stuff. It can also help your mental health. I know I just kind of touched on that a little bit with myself, but for a very long time, I felt so trapped and confined to the male gender because I felt like everyone either just saw me as a straight up confused dude or a guy that was trying to be not a guy. And it was frustrating. I think that's probably the best way. So frustrating. And it took a long time for me to really feel like people saw me for me. And now that I do feel like people see me for me, you know, I do feel happier. I do feel like I can navigate the world better. You know, for the most part, it's a very beneficial thing. And at least for me, and I'm, yeah. And I guess I should say, actually, before I keep going, so for me, passing as a non-binary person, I prefer, or whatever, to be read as someone who was assigned female at birth, who is gender non-conforming. So that, you know, for people who do understand non-binary people, if they read me as non-binary, that is the best. But for people who don't understand non-binary people or haven't even heard the term, for them to read me as like, oh, you're a girl who, like, dresses like a guy, or who, you know, doesn't look like a regular stereotypical woman. Like, I don't fit into the woman box, but I'm still kind of reduced to womanhood, I guess. And for me, that actually feels comfortable, at least from strangers and people that I interact with, like, regularly, but not, like, on a personal level. That's perfectly fine with me. That feels the most comfortable. And sometimes I am okay with, or not some, I also like just being read as androgynous as well. But it's like those two things are the most comfortable for me. Just like pure androgyny or gender nonconforming woman. Even though I don't identify as a woman, and even like say, like as soon as I said that, I'm kind of like, like, I don't like that term used on me. But if people read me that way, then like it's okay. I don't exactly know how to explain it, but that's kind of where my head's at. Also for me, and probably for a lot of trans people as well, but again, not all of them, passing, gives me gender euphoria. It gives me, you know, I feel like my inside matches my outside, and that feels very good to me, and I enjoy that. It makes me feel like myself. And so for me, it is something that I prefer, I guess. Basically just not to be read as male. But even sometimes that's okay in the sense that like probably not when I'm dressed like this, but if I don't have makeup on and I don't have earrings and I'm just like walking down the street in guys' clothes, like, and someone calls me he, I'm like, I don't care. Like, they probably just think I'm some like feminine gay guy or something. Like, that's fine. I don't care. But it does kind of depend on how I dress. Because if I like have my makeup done and my hair down and I'm wearing like leggings and someone's like, I'm like, excuse me? Like, what are you looking at? So for any cisgender people watching this, I do want to say, try and educate yourself. I know that, especially if you don't know anyone personally who's trans or non-binary, it obviously there's Google, there's things like that, but sometimes it can still be confusing or like whatever, you know, that makes sense. If you're watching this video, it seems like you're already trying to learn, which I think is awesome. My advice would just be to try to keep learning. I have plenty of other videos if you are trying to learn things or understand things from another perspective. You are also welcome to either comment on this video or message me on my Instagram account. I do have all of my accounts linked in the description box down below. And that also goes for any of you who are trans or non-binary and want to reach out to me. You're welcome to message me on Instagram. Is probably the best way to get a hold of me. I don't respond every day because I try to take time for myself. I get kind of overwhelmed if I'm always responding to people, but I will get back to you. And yeah, so that is everything that I have for today. If you made it to the end, let me know. And again, I do want to say you are valid whether or not you pass. You are important whether or not you pass, and you are valuable whether or not you pass, and whether or not you choose to or don't choose to pass, or cannot pass. You know, I know there's so many different circumstances, but, and I know it can be very discouraging, you know, if passing is something that you, it's something that is important to you and you feel like you're not there yet. I know how frustrating that can be. Like, oh my God, it is like the most frustrating, like defeating feeling ever. You know, like you go out in public and you're like, oh, I'm really feeling myself. I look so good. And then someone walks up to you and they're like, hello, sir. And you're just like, okay, my entire day is ruined. It's fine, whatever. Like, it's a horrible feeling. And I totally get that. And I don't necessarily have like advice. I don't know exactly what to say, but I do just want to remind you that like, even if strangers don't see you for you or your friends or your family or like whoever, you know, I want you to know that you still are you and you are still valid as you, even if your outside body doesn't feel like it matches who you are. I don't want you to question your worth or your value, even though it can feel that way sometimes. So I just wanted to end it on that note. I hope you all have a wonderful day or night or blah, 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 morning, whenever you are watching this. I hope you feel wonderful. Yeah, so Thanks for watching.